Hi, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. All right, so today I want to talk about the things I wish I knew before I ever sold my first home. The first house I ever sold, it was a new house. We hadn't been there long, and it was really a stepping stone into me getting into real estate because we were making a profit on this house, and then we are going to buy a house that was incomplete that we were going to finish. And so it was a risk, it was the profit. However, emotionally, I didn't want to sell the house because it's like, I don't want to move. But then when I looked at how much are we going to make and how long do people work to make this amount of money? Typically in the real world, it just made sense that even though moving is a pain in the butt, that we should do this. And so I know that for a lot of people, when you stay in your house for 2 years, you don't necessarily have to pay income taxes on the profit. Now, it depends on how big the profit is and other factors, and you might have some state taxes to to pay. So check with an accountant. Don't just take my advice from this video. However, it can be a way to make profit if you decide to move every few years if it's worth it to you. For me, at the time, it was worth it, and over the course of my career, it's been worth it a lot of times. So, emotionally, let's talk about the emotional factors of selling a home. There is the emotional connection to the home that you've got to let it go and the memories. Now, for me, I always feel like I take the memories with me. They're not left in this house, they're going to stay with me. So, I would recommend that to you to keep in mind that just because you leave something doesn't mean that the memories stay there. They can stay with you forever. The other factor is family opinions, and this is such a big deal. It comes into play when people go under contract and they cancel the purchase of a house because of a family member's opinion, and then also selling and what you're going to do and all the things of where you're going to go and how close or far away you may be from your family. That can be a huge factor in the emotions of moving. Another thing is the potential for buyers to come in and criticize your house. Now, that can be in the place of feedback. And as a realtor, I'm just going to be honest, there are certain personalities that I just refuse to automatically send the feedback to. We need to soften that feedback or explain what that feedback means before the current seller gets a hold of that. The other thing is that I did personally do myself, but I don't recommend it. And actually, in our state of Pennsylvania, the listing has to disclose if this is something you're going to do. Even includes doorbell cameras. And I did have an instance where we captured what a home inspector was saying on a doorbell camera, and it was not something that he should have said. But be aware of recording what people are saying. Funny story that happened to me was in another house that I sold. There was recording going on, and the agent said, I was very young. We didn't have a lot. So the agent criticized our furniture, said, this house would look a lot better if it had better furniture in there. So I heard that. I laughed. I agreed with it. As an agent, I would never say that. I'm always careful, even before the amount of recording that goes on today. I'm always really careful about what I say. If someone doesn't like a house, I let them express that. If there's any value I can add, like, oh, I think you could simply fix it by doing this or that, if I think the house is good for them, I always try to put that positive spin on it. But if you're going to record what people say in your house, you gotta really have thick skin and be ready to hear it. And the other thing is, I wouldn't take offense to criticism. I would really recommend I always like when if I'm showing a buyer that they say what they think out loud at the same time, because then I know, like, what they're wanting. I mean, some people like Chinese food, some people like Mexican food, some people like Indian food, some people like it all, some people like none of it, right? And so just because someone has a criticism towards something doesn't mean that people feel that way or all people feel that way. So it may just mean they're not the right person for that. And that's okay. You don't need everybody, you just need one. So now that you're emotionally prepared, I think the next step is to think about your timeline and also do your must do preparations. So the first thing I would start with is decluttering. Declutter, declutter, declutter. I mean, the amount of times I've gotten rid of so much stuff and then packed things, and then as I'm unpacking in the next place, I'm throwing like half of this stuff away. I mean, you cannot declutter enough. And if you've been in your home more than 5 years, I mean, there is so much decluttering that needs to be done. It builds up so easy. Those junk drawers just appear everywhere in the house, don't they? The other thing is curb appeal. So I always like to tell people, walk up to your front door, walk down your sidewalk, park at the road, walk up to your house, look at your yard, look at your landscaping, look at your sidewalk, look at the things by your front door, look at the cobwebs, look at, is there any little rotting carpentry work? Is there any painting that needs to be done? Does your door need to be sanded and restained? Do you need a new doorknob? Simple, cheap fixes that can make it look sparkle when people walk up, because most of us don't use the front door, but most of the time when we think about selling, those buyers are coming to that front door. Are there any minor repairs that will make a big difference? Has there been a leak somewhere and there's like a stain from the leak and you just never got around to it? It doesn't seem like a big deal, but in reality, it might cost you a lot of money. So it's worth going ahead and getting that taken care of. So, staging, is there any staging you can do in decluttering and see what are the things that you can take out? If you're going to start boxing stuff up, I do think a lot of people probably need to remove a third of the things out of each room and to make it look more luxurious. I think if you designate either one room in the house or just the garage. I mean, men usually look at the garage and all garages kind of look the same. So just put all that stuff in there, and men usually don't mind the junk. They can overlook it, so it's fine. Something I would recommend doing is you personally go through your house, take a picture on your phone, and then look at the picture. Try to judge the picture like it wasn't your home. What would you do differently? That could really help with staging. You don't always have to spend money staging. Sometimes in staging, you can just rearrange things and it works. Personally, I don't want to live in a perfectly staged house. I do like my house to be clutter free and look nice and be clean, but I don't want it to be perfectly staged. Sometimes I just need it to function for how my family wants to use it. You know what I mean? If you're preparing your house to sell it, you want to prepare it staged and not to be functional. Hopefully, it's not gonna take you long. Maybe you can leave for the weekend, get your house perfectly ready, leave for the weekend, and then you've got it sold and you don't have to deal with that anymore. Now you just have to deal with packing more. The next things to think about are your documents, gathering any documents you might need, looking at your finances, thinking about where money's gonna come from where. If you're gonna be moving from one place to another, do you want it to line up perfectly? Do you want to have to go somewhere in between? Do you want to get an Airbnb and store your stuff? Do you have money for all the deposits and things in the meantime that you're going to need? So, what I would recommend is when you go on the market, middle of the week, end of the week, prepare your house for that. Also, think about security concerns. Do you have things that need to be locked up? Do you have valuables? Do you want to just take them out of the house? I once sold a house for a bachelor and he had two teenagers living with him. So that house just stayed a mess. And there were times where we had showings, confirmed to get scheduled. And he'd come home and he had so much laundry going all the time. He just grabbed all the laundry. Some of it was wet, some of it was dry, some of it was clean, some of it was dirty, some of it was half dry. And he just threw it in his trunk. And so he was driving around with all of this laundry in his trunk so that we could show his house and get it sold for him. Think about having timelines for when you want to show your house and making as much availability as possible. Also, about your pets. Do you want to take them out of the home? Do you have a safe place for them to be where they're locked up, where they can't get out or escape? So, if you have pets and you're going to leave them at the home, I would really consider, are they going to be locked in a cage? Are they going to be making a lot of noise and distracting the buyers? It's so important if you're selling your home that the people coming through are going to feel an emotional connection to your house. This is why it's recommended to take down personal pictures and personal items because people will stop and look at who lives here. They'll think, oh, do I know this person? And they get distracted from looking at the house, from looking at the personal items. The same thing multiplied applies with pets. It's distracting. Maybe the buyer doesn't like a pet or a certain kind of pet, or maybe they're allergic, or maybe the noise is so distracting that they can't think and feel what they need to feel. They don't get a good feeling, not because the house isn't right, but because, maybe the noise distracted them. So if it works better for you to do just one massive open house and get the pets out of there for the time being, that might be better than just constantly showing and having to deal with that or having to leave your pets there. You may want to really strategize what works best for you, your family, and your beloved pet. So, to revisit being emotionally prepared for selling your home, I think it's best to have in mind what you're going to do when you receive that first offer. And if it doesn't go the way you want, then I would consider how to handle that. Now, when buyers make offers, they're usually emotionally excited. And we know emotion typically dissipates over time. So if it takes a day or two to really think about it and come up with a counter or come up with a counter strategy, then I think you're losing that emotional momentum that buyer has, and you could potentially lose the buyer. And I don't think this is in a seller's best interest. When people buy their first home, it is such a big deal. There are so many agents that just specifically love to work with first time home buyers. There is so much hand holding that goes on and explaining and re explaining and explaining again and re explaining. And it's just something so special. It's the American dream and it builds wealth. It gives people pride, pride in a good way. They're proud that you did this. You're proud of your property. It's something to show off. And all those emotions play into when it's time to move on to the next chapter. So it can also be an exciting time. It can be a time for upgrading. It can be a time for the next chapter of life, a new open door, a new job, a different life change. And when we enter things with optimism, even if maybe their circumstances aren't always optimistic, if we can just see it as an opportunity and good things will come to me later, then I think that will really help with the emotional factor of moving on from your first home. So, if you are still living in your first home and you've thought about moving and you just really need some help or somebody to talk to, some guidance, even if you're not in my area, or if you are, better yet, please reach out. I'd love to help you. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to show you maybe the next steps that you can take based on what your circumstances are. So feel free to reach out. As always, thank you for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.